Good evening, I'm Patsy Swank. If any one performer can be said to have changed the face of opera in this century, that performer was Maria Callas. Some singers had greater voices, some equal dramatic gifts, some a presence almost as magical. But none combined them all for the compelling service to music as did the New York-born Greek girl who grew up to be the legendary Maria Callas. Her life and career are the subject of a film to be seen Saturday evening at 8 p.m. on KERA and the entire PBS network. Its producer is Peter Weinberg of New York's WNET 13. Its writer is John Ardoin, music editor of the Dallas Morning News and author of 2 books on Callas. He was also her longtime friend. Maria Callas had a close personal relationship in Dallas. Lawrence Kelly, founder of the Dallas Civic Opera, and Nicola Ruscino, its artistic director, officiated at her American debut in Chicago in 1954 and were supportive and helpful during her managerial and personal problems at that time. She never forgot that, and Callas it was who presented the benefit concert that was the beginning of the Dallas Civic Opera in 1957. She came back as Medea, as La Traviata, and as Lucia di Lammermoor in the following seasons, and she was in Dallas, in fact, at the time of her historic firing from the Metropolitan Opera. But after 1959, she did not sing opera again in Dallas. Aristotle Onassis came into her life, and she returned to Dallas only after he had left it. She took refuge with Kelly and Ruscino and others of her Dallas friends when Onassis' engagement to Mrs. Kennedy became known. She promised at that time to return to the Dallas Company, but she never did. She sang here only once again during the sad and ill-advised concert tour of 1974. Lawrence Kelly died on September 16th of that year in Dallas. Maria Callas died in Paris 2 years later on the same day. John, where did you first know Maria Callas?
Well, you mean personally?
Yes.
Because I think I've always known her as an artist. I can't remember a time when I didn't respond to her, which was, of course, through records first. But I first met her in Paris in 1964 when I went to cover performances she was doing there of Norma at the opera. And it was purely by hook and crook I managed to get an interview with her. She wasn't too happy with journalists at that part in her life. But I did get an interview, and I was told I'd have 20 minutes. And we wound up talking for about 2 hours. But I think we really became friends in the summer of '68, which I'm sure you remember her visit to Dallas at that time.
Yes, very well.
She had been on vacation in Mexico with Larry Kelly, the founder of the Dallas Civic Opera, and had fallen and cracked a rib or something, so she came to Dallas to have it looked at. And Larry had been with her most of the summer, escorting her around. That was just before the announcement of Mr. Onassis' forthcoming marriage. Mm-hmm. And I think he was a little glad to get back to his office, and out from underneath the pressures of prima donnaism, shall we say, I sort of fell heir to her in a way. I took her to the doctor, and we went grocery shopping and did all sorts of wonderful mundane things together. And at that point became very, very close.
There are a lot of other writers and journalists that have passed through her life, I'm sure, who never managed that. What was it, do you think, about the two of you that made this friendship so strong and yet so clear?
I don't know, Patsy. I know that Maria had this sort of antenna about people. I took our friendship as a great compliment in that she decided right away that somebody was a good guy or a bad guy. Really, it was like almost the way she prepared roles and all. Everything was done with just that basic sort of instinct about music, about people, about situations. And for some reason she decided I was a good guy. And so much so that she opened up to me in a way that at first to me was rather almost embarrassing, because she talked so intimately about things in her life and her feelings and all. But that was just Maria. If you know, she felt instinctively that she could rely on you or trust you, then she opened up as though she had known you for 20 years as such. And I think also because she trusted Larry so much, and Larry and I were good friends.
Was that constant? Did anything ever happen to change it?
Yes, I'm afraid it did. In that when she made her last concert tour in 73, 74, you remember, in Dallas, as much as I wanted to believe and as much as I wanted to cheer, I was unable to. To me, it was a very sad occasion because she was fighting very hard to find an identity. She'd been away from the stage for 8 years, and she wanted to believe. And this woman who was usually so fiercely honest about everything and so fiercely self-critical was, for the first time that I had ever known her or anyone else, really sort of deluding herself. And I think she knew by that point that I wasn't going to lie to her, that I was going to tell her the truth, and which I tried to do as gentlemanly as possible. And she didn't want to hear the truth at that point. And so it caused a wrench between us.
Well, you had told the truth about her before. Your reviews had not been uniformly praising.
No, as a matter of fact, the spring before, when she was at the Juilliard School of Music doing master classes, I was taking her one day to the eye doctor because she developed glaucoma. And she said to me, out of the blue, she said, "Larry tells me you don't like my new record," which was a recording of things she had done many years before but had suppressed and finally allowed to be issued. And I said, "No, Maria, I don't." And she said, "Tell me why." And I told her that I didn't think that they were, that they did her justice, and that her first instincts to suppress them had been the best ones. And she thought about it for a moment, and she said, "Well, we'll see, but I appreciate your telling me." But the difference was, I think, Patsy, at that time, she wasn't under the pressure performing. She wasn't back in harness, shall we say, needing to believe in herself, needing to hold on to or find an identity she had lost. So she didn't feel threatened, so she could accept the truth with more grace. That's why, maybe I was foolish, but that's why I felt I could say the truth when she was here in 74. But that I misjudged. I don't really regret it. I would do it again, but I was sorry it led to a breach between us which I was unable to repair before her death. Because I had fierce admiration for the woman and the human being as much as for the artist. And if this was a slight fall from grace or a slight Achilles heel, I think she was entitled to it by that point. I just wish that I could have believed more with her at the time.
How did you become involved with this film?
Well, about a year ago, there was to be a convention in Houston by the Central Opera Service, and part of the meeting, it was a national meeting, was to be a panel on television and opera. And I was asked to serve on the panel, and as a matter of fact, to give the keynote address that in Houston. And one of the people in the panel was a man named Richard DeSico in New York, who was working with David Griffiths, producer of performing arts films at WNET in New York. And Rick was a great fan of Callas's, and we talked a great deal about Callas. At the time we were setting up this panel, this seminar on television. And during our not our negotiations, but our discussion, shall we say, for this panel, Callas died in Paris. And it was Rick who went to David Griffiths and said, "Gee, I think, you know, that it would make a fantastic documentary on this woman and her life and the controversy." And David said he thought it was a natural too, and Rick said, "I think, you know, John Ardoin would be the person to write it." And so David said, "Why don't you see if you'd be interested?" And so that's how it really all began. And a year later, we have a film.
Here we are.
Yes, exactly.
How did you decide whom to interview? I know that must have been a narrowing down of an enormous gallery of people.
Well, we made a long list of people that were still active and are still available, who had been close to her either as stage directors, colleagues on the stage, conductors, or simply close friends who had observed her career over a long period of time. And it was, what should you say, time and tide. It was natural, sort of an attrition that narrowed the list down. This one was available, this one wasn't. I remember we tried our best to get to Joan Sutherland, who had sung with Callas early in her career in London, and who was very, very willing to be part of the film, but she was off to Australia for 3 months of opera there, so she was out of the picture. We wanted very badly John Vickers. He agreed to be filmed and interviewed. And then he found out that we were doing this with the BBC, and he was having an enormous battle with the BBC. So he fell by the wayside. Leonard Bernstein, who'd conducted for at La Scala, was having a very personal crisis in his life at that time because his wife was dying, and it made it very difficult for him to think of other things, and so he was lost to us. So little by little, the list sort of narrowed itself down as to who was available, who was well, who was would see us. Even so, we had some very, very close calls. People we wanted to get, we almost didn't get, such as Renata Tebaldi, who was the great rival of Callas for so long, or so the press and the fans conceived this rivalry, shall we say. She was very, very reluctant to appear on television. It wasn't so much her reluctance to talk about Callas, but she didn't like the idea of herself on television. But finally, through the intervention of Carlo Maria Giulini, she agreed to see us in Milan, and we literally stayed over 2 more days and got the interview, the only one that she's ever given on film about Callas. So it was nip and tuck for a while, but gradually the whole thing fell into place. And
well, you still couldn't use in the film everything that you used, and so we're going to look at a few of those scenes that were not used with some of the most interesting and perhaps some of the most important people.
I'm glad that we have this opportunity to save some of the film, shall we say, because there was, we started off wondering if we had enough, and then found out we had far too much. And some of the people we talked to had such extraordinary things to say, like Renata Scotto, who saw Callas when she was a young student in Milan first, and who later sang with her, and Giancarlo Minati, who had seen her career from the very beginning, and who had tried to get her at La Scala before she was a member of the company there to sing in one of his operas. And of course Tito Gobbi, with whom she was so closely associated with in performances of Tosca, and the Barber of Seville, and Traviata. And finally our own Nicola Ruscigno of Dallas Civic Opera, who conducted her American debut in 1954 in Chicago as Norma. And of course made many, many records with her, including her last record sessions in 1969.
Well, we can have a look at those.
And I remember I went to La Scala, up in the Loggione, no money at all. I remember my teacher gave me the ticket to go, and I was very happy when I had the opportunity to see and to hear Callas in Norma. My first opera was Norma, and I was very impressed by the personality. And I remember Callas was fat, tall, big, but when she moved her hands and push out her voice, especially in the moment, in the very strong moment, I was crazy about her. And I said, if I will be a singer, if I will be somebody, I want to be like her.
Maria had a way of even transforming her body for the exigencies of the role, which is a great triumph. And in Traviata, everything would slope down. Everything indicated sickness, fatigue, softness. You know, her arms would move as if they had no bones, like great ballerinas. In Medea, everything was angular. I mean, she'd never make a soft gesture. It was always very, even the walk she used was, you know, like a tiger walk. I am not a record buff. I don't like canned music. So I really must admit that I'd never heard the Callas voice until the first rehearsal when she arrived, and it was a rehearsal à deux, just the two of us, without even a pianist. I sat at the piano and played the whole score. I think Maria had rightful, I won't say doubts, but you know, who is Ruscigno? And I am doing this very important debut in her own country, because she was an American, and I was not Serafin, or I was not Votto, or any of these great conductors. And we went through the whole score. Maria said so that we would be more comfortable. I think it was a test. I think that Maria had such integrity that if she found in that first rehearsal that I wasn't up to par, I don't think she'd have made any bones about it, you know. Then after that, it was that too was very easy, I must say. It was a very good rehearsal and a very satisfying one. But after that, I mean, it was really a pleasure. I mean, she is by far the easiest person to conduct that I've ever worked with.
Well, I believe that she was blessed with a Greek mask. She, I think, more than her acting, and even more than her voice, it was her presence which was hypnotic. She had a kind of histrionic power just by walking on the stage. And then I feel that that she was extraordinarily musical. She was a marvelous instrument on which a stage director could express himself, or a conductor. She was. I don't think that she herself was a great actress, although many people would disagree with me. I think in the hands of Visconti, she was a great actress. In other hands, I thought she was less good.
I'm sure Callas will remain in the history for a long, long time. In 100 years, people will still talk about Maria Callas as a beautiful and unique star which was crossing the sky of opera for a rather short time, but giving light forever to the world of opera.
What was the biggest problem that you dealt with on this film? Was it people? Was it material? What was it?
I think it was simply like getting the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to fit. I said I came out of this experience with a tremendous new admiration for opera impresarios everywhere, that are able to get this singer or that conductor or this stage director all in one spot at one time and put together something that worked. Just coordinating all of these itineraries, these people in many, many spots of the world, and pinning them down long enough to film them was a tremendous chore. We came into the Pergola, which is a beautiful little theater there, as you saw a moment ago, behind Miscato, and the Alvin Nicolai Company was there rehearsing. They had a performance at 5 o'clock that day, and of course no one had told them we were going to film, and they were very sort of hard-boiled about it, that this was their time in the theater, they needed it, and they weren't about to be quiet. And we were getting a little worried as to how we'd make this interview with all this noise going on the stage, the dancers grunting and groaning and stretching and talking. But luckily, it turns out that a couple of members of the company were great opera fans and recognized Miss Scotto when she came in. And then when they found out that we were making a film about Callas, they started policing themselves, and several of them telling everybody else to be quiet, and really the company kept the company quiet. And afterwards there was a sort of great love fest between Scotto and the members of the company. They invited her to their performances, she invited them to her performances, and so everything worked out just beautifully.
What did you do about film of Callas herself? There is a surprising amount of it in the picture.
Well, there turned out to be. We were afraid at the very beginning that there wasn't going to be enough. We had sent cables to television in France and in Italy and in Germany, and had gotten no replies, and or had gotten negative replies, and I knew that there had to be more film. All we started out with was a second act of Tosca done in London in '64, a series of interviews she had done with Lord Harwood in England in '68, and some newsreel footage and all. And we got to Paris to begin our filming. We wanted to go and film the auction of her estate. Film it turned out we had no use for, but we thought at the time it might prove very valuable or exciting. And an appointment was set up with us at the archives of French television. They said they had some film. They didn't know what it was, and they weren't sure if it was any good, but we thought we couldn't afford not to see it. And so we went early one morning. It's way out in a suburb of Bagnolet, where all those terrible skyscrapers are now in Paris that are ruining the whole skylight. And I'll be more sympathetic about them now, though, after having found treasures out there. About 9 in the morning, we sat down in a projection room, and they turned on some film, and it turned out to be the entire 1958 concert which was her debut in Paris. And it had been shown live over Eurovision, but by some miracle, the French had kept a kinescope. And it turned out to be some of the most exciting performance film of hers that I'd ever come across, that really gives a feeling for her on stage, this incredible use of her hands and her eyes, and that strange, peculiar loping walk she had. And you'll see quite a bit of this in the documentary. There's a large scene from Trovatore, part of Norma, and a scene from Tosca, all from this concert. Then later, we came back to Paris and found a 1965 concert with a beautiful performance of the last act aria from Sonnambula, which closes the documentary. And we even found 4 minutes of her actually on stage with sound as Norma in Paris in '64.
It's amazing.
We found silent film in Chicago of her Butterfly, done at a dress rehearsal. We found silent film in Italy of her last Medeas at La Scala. And suddenly, just sort of like a dam broke. Interviews with her voice teacher, Elvira Di Hildago, who is now nearly 90, and who we were unable to film in Milan, but we found this wonderful interview film that had been made in France. And an interview with Callas and Visconti. So the pieces sort of began falling into place.
Well, it's interesting to me that so many of her colleagues were so helpful. I do remember a long time ago having a conversation with Montserrat Caballé before she even came to this country, in which the person that she wanted to talk about was Maria Callas, because she had such admiration for her, and she felt at that time, and I think this was before she'd ever known her well, but that's not a thing that you hear very often from one soprano about another.
You know, Patsy, if I could say anything about this experience, it was the incredible generosity of people, their willingness to change schedules, to be with us, to talk about her. Her influence is tremendous. The admiration she evokes in people are tremendous. Talking about Caballé, we interviewed her during dress rehearsals for Norma at Covent Garden in London, in the dressing room that Callas had used. And she was very moved to be talking about Callas anyway, who, as you said, she vastly admires. But to be in this room brought her almost to the point of tears, and brought us to the point of tears too. It was so intense, her feelings and her expression of them. I remember she said that it was ridiculous for her to try to sing a part that Callas had sung. She did it because the music was beautiful and that she was asked, but she realized that she was still just a student of Callas's. And this is, for someone of this magnitude and of this importance, was a very generous admission. Miscato, too, as you just heard, spoke of the tremendous influence Callas had on her career.
Was it worth it to Maria Callas? She was a lonely, unhappy, often difficult woman.
That's such a difficult question. There are times, you know, when there are people, certain people who are blessed and cursed with an extraordinary gift, in which the gift is almost greater than the human being. And Callas was one of these people. It was almost as if her wishes, her life, her own happiness were all subservient to this incredible, incredible gift that she was given, this gift that reached out and taught us things about music we knew very well, but showed us new things we'd never thought about, new possibilities. I think that's why singers admire her so. I think that's why conductors admire her so. I know that's why I admire her so. And she paid a tremendously difficult and expensive price for this career. I don't think she always understood what she did or why she did. She knew she had a tremendous effect on audiences and on people. But it was not something that she could always live with gracefully or happily. It was, I once said to her, it must be very enviable to be Maria Callas. And she said, no. She said, it's a very terrible thing to be Maria Callas, because it's a question of trying to understand something that you can never really understand, because she couldn't explain what she did. It was all done by instinct. It was something incredibly embedded deep within her.
Thank you, John. Tito Gobi had this one more small story to tell about Maria Callas. We close with a reminiscence of Madame Callas in some of her greatest roles, as we listen to her voice singing Visi d'arte from La Tosca.
I think Maria was not really a very happy person. she had some good moments in her life. I hope she was happy here and there. But I never saw her really happy. I remember one day in New York, I asked her for dinner with my family, my wife and my daughter, and she said she was alone, so come with dinner with us. We had a wonderful dinner, we enjoyed a lot. She was playing and acting and making fun with Cecilia, my daughter. And then when we took her to the lift of the plaza, she said, listen, I'm alone, I'm so lonely here. I have not even my little dog to keep company. Why don't you buy me another ice cream and I stay a little longer with you? And so we went out. I bought a little ice cream for all of us, and we had this little cone of ice cream, and then she said, okay, now I can go, I can retire. So I don't think she was really a happy person.